Hello everyone and welcome to the chapter number 21 of Blender Master Course Basic Shaders Part 1. Till now in this course we have understood about the Blender interface, all the modeling tools in Blender, and we even discussed about all the modifiers in complete detail. And in the recent chapters we explored the node components, tried to create some textures, and even understood about the working of some node systems. And now we are ready to create our own materials with all this knowledge. And so in this chapter we'll begin with understanding the basic shaders and we'll be creating these materials in Blender. And yes, if you are new to this course, then do check out the previous 21 chapters from the link of the playlist in the pinned comment. Now, before starting with the creation of our materials, there's one important thing to discuss with you, which is also the first topic of our chapter, and it is the Node Wrangler add-on. So the Node Wrangler provides various tools that will help you to work with nodes quickly and efficiently. But to use it, we have to enable it from the Blender preferences. So click on the edit menu on the top and select the preferences. Now here in the Blender preferences, you have so many options, but we'll select the add-ons and we have to search for the Node Wrangler. So I'll go to the search bar and type node, and here on the third number you have the Node Wrangler add-on. To enable it, you have to check this option, and now the Node Wrangler add-on is enabled. So I'll close this Blender preferences now, and now to see how exactly this Node Wrangler add-on helps us, we have to give it a material, and for this we need to add a shader editor here. So I'll take my cursor over here, right click and select horizontal split. Let's take our cursor over here and left click to split the area. Now to change this into the shader editor, click on this icon and select the shader editor. Now we have the default material assigned to our cube. For example, if I want to add some image texture to my cube, then one way to do this is to go to the shader editor, press Shift plus A, then you can go to the texture to add the image texture, and suppose you want to rotate or scale your texture, then you would need a vector mapping, and also you would have to add an input node which is the texture coordinate. But you don't have to do all this if you have the Node Wrangler turned on, which means that if I select the principal BSDF alone and press Ctrl plus T, then it would generate all the nodes that are required for image texture. So instead of adding each one separately, you can use this shortcut of Ctrl plus T to add the entire node system for image texture. And this is one of the uses of the Node Wrangler add-on. Now before making our first basic shader, we need to do some changes. The first thing is that we'll delete this default cube by pressing X on the keyboard, and let's add a UV sphere. So in the add menu and in the mesh, I'll select the UV sphere. Let's move it upwards in the Z direction like this, and left click to finalize. Right click and apply the shade smooth, and now we need to add a plane below the UV sphere, which will basically become the base. So I'll press Shift plus A, go to mesh and select the plane. To adjust it, I'll tab into the edit mode. Now we'll go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad, and we should scale this up in the Y direction. For this, press S and then Y and scale it up like this. Left click to finalize. Let's also scale it up in the X direction by pressing S and then X and scale it up like this, and left click to finalize. And now our scene looks like this. But we would also need a face at the background, and for this I'll go to the edge select mode by pressing 2, then I'll select this edge, and to make a face at the background we need to extrude it up in the Z direction. So I'll press E and Z to move it up in the Z direction, and left click to finalize. Now it looks like this. To make it look realistic, we should change the angle here to something like a curved angle. For this we'll use the bevel tool on this edge. So with this edge selected, press Ctrl plus B, move the cursor slightly away, and to increase the number of segments you can use your scroll wheel. So let's add some more segments and left click to finalize. And now it has a perfectly curved angle. And now we can come out of the edit mode by pressing the tab key again. So if I go to the camera view by pressing the 0 on the numpad, it seems that we have to adjust our camera position. To do this, press N to open the properties toolbar, click on the view option and select the lock camera to view. We learnt about using this in our previous chapters, so if you haven't watched them yet, you can check the link in the pinned comment. Now to move my camera view, I'll hold down the middle mouse button, and if I drag it, then the position of this camera would change. So I'll keep it here. To move it upwards, I'll hold the shift key and the middle mouse button and move it up like this. Now I'll adjust it in such a way that we have this scene of this UV sphere with the base and the background in front of the camera view. So this view looks perfect, and I'll finalize it. So I'll uncheck the lock camera to view option, and to make it perfectly aligned with the object and the entire scene, click on this item option here, then select the camera. You can select the camera from the scene collection here also. And here you can see that you have the location and rotation of this camera. So here the location in the X direction is very near to 0, and to make it perfectly aligned with the object and the scene, I'll set it to exact 0. Now I can use the location in the Y axis, so I'll adjust it here. Similarly, you can use the location in the Z axis to move upwards or downwards, so I'll set it here. Now in the rotation part, The rotation in the X is set to 75, but to make it perfectly aligned, we'll change it to 90 degrees and press enter. Now we'll change the location in the Z axis with this option, and I'll reduce it and I'll finalize this one. Now here the rotation in the Y direction is very close to 0, so I'll change it to 0 and press enter. Also in the Z axis, the rotation is very close to 0, so I click on it and enter the 0 value. So the main thing here is to keep the rotation value at either 90 degree or 0 degrees, and then you can adjust the location of your camera using the Y and the Z axis like this. So here I have finalized this position of my camera. Now to prevent your camera from being accidentally moved or rotated at some angle, you can lock these values here. To do this, click on this lock icon here, and now the location of X axis is locked at 0 meters. I'll also do this with the other parameters like the location in all other axes and also the rotation. So now with the camera selected, if I press G and try to move it, you will notice that nothing happens. That's because we have locked the editing of the location of our camera. So basically the camera is now locked in our scene. Similarly, I'll also select this UV sphere and we lock its transformation from here as well. So we'll click on this lock icon to lock the editing of the location. Similarly for the rotation also, and for the scale value as well. Also we'll select the plane at the back, and we'll also lock its transformation. And yes, to apply lock on all these values together, you can press the left mouse button and drag your mouse like this. Now all the transformations are locked for all our objects except the light in our scene. And if you look closely, then you will see these straight lines at the back which are appearing on this plane object. To fix this, with the plane selected, click right mouse button and select shade smooth by angle. And now it appears smooth. And now we can go to the render view to see how it looks. So I'll click on this icon here, and here we have the render view of our object. But currently it's showing only the scene lights, and that's why it appears like this. But Blender also have some default HDRIs which you can access by clicking on this drop down menu and unchecking the scene world option. And to change the HDRI, you need to click here, and here you have different type of HDRIs. And to know about each HDRI, you can simply keep your cursor over it and it will display you the name of that HDRI. This one is named night.exr, meaning that if I apply it, then it will give me a lighting setup that you would expect to see if you kept your object somewhere outside during the night time. Similarly, there are others also. Like this one is the interior studio lighting, this one is the forest lighting. Currently I think that we should work with the interior lighting setup, so I'll select the fourth one, and this one looks perfect for our scene. And now is the time to adjust the lighting. So if I zoom out and select the lamp here, with a left mouse button click, I can move it by pressing the G key, and you will see the influence of this light on your object and the surroundings as well. So I think that we should place it here. So I left click to finalize its position, and to get a better view of its location, you can go to the top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. And now if I'll move it, then the light would move only in the X and Y axis. So we'll keep it here in front of the UV sphere and left click to finalize the position. And to add some more lights, I'll create a duplicate of it by pressing Shift plus D, and I'll place it here. Left click to finalize the position, and let's go back to the camera view by pressing 0 on the numpad. I'll zoom in to adjust the view, and we can even change the color of these lights. For example, if I select the light here by left clicking on it, and if I click on this green light icon, here I have the properties that I can change for this light. So if I go to the color option and change it to something like pink, you will notice the reflection of some pink light on this side of the UV sphere. And right now the render engine is set to EV by default. To change it to cycles, go to the render properties here, click on EV, and from this drop down menu you can choose the cycles render engine. And for a better rendering, do make sure that this denoisy option is turned on in the viewport as well as in the render. And now we'll give a simple material to this background. So I'll select this plain background, go to the shade editor and click on new material. And I think that the color of this background should be a little dark. So I'll go to the base color and let's turn this into gray color. For this I'll take this brightness slider and bring it down like this. This much looks perfect. And also you have various options like metallic, strength and roughness. So we'll increase the roughness to around 0.9 so that the surface of the background is completely rough. And right now you can see that the area which is outside the camera region is also being showed to us in the viewport. And it's always better to hide this area. And the biggest advantage of doing this is that you would be saving some of your render time while being in this 3D viewport. And to do this, you have to select your camera, click on this camera icon to edit the properties, go to the viewport display option. Here you have an option of passive part out, and if I increase it to 1, then now we'll see only the area that we have to render and not the surroundings. Also, one more thing that we need to do is to select this UV sphere, and if I tap to the edit mode and press 1 for the vertex select mode, then you can see that the number of vertices on this UV sphere are very small in number. And to make better models with nice shaders and materials, you should have a model with high number of vertices. For this, I'll go back to the object mode and we'll apply the subdivision modifier over it. So I'll go to the modify properties, click on add modifier, and in the generate, we can find the subdivision surface. And you can even save this as your default startup file, meaning that whenever you will open Blender, you will have your shader editor here, and a 3D viewport here with this UV sphere and a background at the back along with the entire lighting system that we are having right now. Basically everything that you can see in your Blender file right now will be added to your new file by default whenever you open Blender. And for all our upcoming chapters related to materials, textures and nodes, we'll be starting with this layout or the interface only. So to save this as the startup file, click on the file option at the top, go to defaults, and here you have the option of save startup file. So I'll click on it, and then it will ask for a confirmation to save the startup file. So I'll click on it again, and now the startup file is saved. It might have asked you to save or to name your file if you didn't save your file before. So now whenever you open a new file in Blender, you will see this layout by default in your Blender scene. And now the next topic for today's chapter is creating a material library. So with this UV sphere selected, I'll go to the shader editor and click on new material. Now we have the default material applied to our UV sphere. And now let's explore the various options in the principal BSDF. The first option that you have here is the metallic strength. So if I increase it to its maximum value of 1, you will see that the object's material now has a very highly metallic look, meaning that its surface is now very shiny and reflecting. And the second option here is the roughness. So if I reduce the roughness to its minimum value of 0, you will see that the object's surface or the material is now highly smooth. That's because we have reduced the roughness to 0. So basically metallic strength would control how shiny and reflecting your object surface is, and the roughness would control how smooth your object looks. Lower the roughness, more smooth the object will be, and higher the roughness value, lesser will be the smoothness of the object surface. And you can see here that it no longer even looks like a metal. It simply looks like a rough ball with no smoothness at all. And to make this material look like a realistic metal, you should keep the roughness to somewhere around 0.3 or 0.4. So let's keep it to a value of 0.35, and now it looks like a realistic metal. And always remember that if your PC is not too fast, then regularly save your file by pressing Ctrl+S so that you don't lose your work due to some crash or any other error, because right now we are in the rendered view, and moreover we have turned on the Cycles render engine, and the Cycles render engine uses more power and memory to create the renders. But one thing that you can change if you are having a low-end PC is the sample number. Basically when I change my view, you can see some sample numbers here. Basically a high number of samples means a better quality but with slower render times, and so it also takes more memory and power. So if you're having a low-end PC and you want to reduce the number of samples, go to the render properties here, and from here you can decrease the number of samples in the 3D viewport. So you can keep it to a lower number like 128 or anything like even 100 or 50 would work fine. But these are the number of samples that you will see while you are in the 3D viewport only. But when you finally render your image, it will still have a high number of samples. And to reduce those samples, you can go to the render option here, and here you have the option of maximum samples. By default it is set to 4096, but you can lower it to a value near 100 or 200 if you're working on some simple projects. And right now I'll be keeping them to the default value. And now coming back to the materials, we'll try to create the chrome material in Blender. So first I'll change the name of this material by clicking here, and I'll type chrome. Now to make the chrome material, I have to reduce the roughness to a very low value, but it should not be 0 because that would make it unrealistic. So let's reduce it to a value of something like 0.05, and now it looks like this. And now I can save this material by creating a material library in Blender. And in order to do this, you have to go to the edit option, click on preferences, and now from this list you have to select the file paths. And here you have an option of asset libraries, and this is where you will be saving all the materials that you create so that you can use it even in some other Blender files. And here you can set the path of that file. So if I click on this folder icon here, then you can browse all your files and folders here and select a particular location where you can create a folder to save all the materials. Now when you have selected that location and you want to create a new folder, click on this icon, and I'll change the name to materials and press enter. Now click on accept, and again click on accept. Now you will have the new paths assigned to your asset libraries. And if I close this, and if you want to save the material in that folder, go to this file option, click on save as, browse that particular location where the folder is saved, and I'll open the materials folder, and from here I can change the name of this file, and I'll name it material1 M81 and click on save as. Now we have saved the file at that location, but to save this chrome material in our asset library, we have to go to this scene collection here, click on the drop down, then you will see that there are two options, one is sphere and the other is modifiers. And if I select the sphere option and click on this drop down, here you have the chrome material saved. So if I click on it and then right click. Here you have an option of mark as asset. So if I select this, you will see this icon of a stack of books appearing along the material name, which means that this material is now saved in our asset library. And to check this, we'll change this shader editor into the asset browser. To do this, click on this icon here, and here in the data you have the option of asset browser. So if I select this, you will see some default assets added to your asset library, and one of them is this chrome material that we just saved. So whenever you are working on a Blender file and you want your object to have this specific material, then you can simply open this asset browser, select this chrome material, and by left clicking on it and dragging like this, you can assign it to your object. Right now our UV sphere was already having this material, so you can't see the changes, but if I left click and drag it to the background, then you can see that the background's material has also changed to the chrome material. For now, I'll press Ctrl+Z to undo, and this is how you use the asset library in Blender. It's a really very useful thing if you work on big projects and you want the same materials or some same assets in more than one scene, and to see only those assets or materials that you have yourself added to the asset library, click on this drop down menu where it's written all and select the user library. Here you will see only those assets and materials which you created on your own and saved them in the asset browser. Right now we have saved only the chrome material, so it's showing the chrome material here. And now the next topic for today's chapter is creating some more metallic materials. Just now we created this chrome material, and now we'll be learning about creation of some more metallic materials. For this, I'll change this into the shader editor again by clicking on this icon and select the shader editor. Now this UV sphere has this chrome material assigned to it, but to create more materials, I will have to create a duplicate of this UV sphere. So I'll select this, press Shift+D and right click to cancel the movement. Now you can see here in the scene collection that you have this sphere, and this is the duplicate that is created. For now, I will hide this previous sphere by clicking on this eye icon, and here we have the duplicate UV sphere in our scene. To give it a new material, we first have to remove the existing chrome material. To do this, click on this cross icon and now click on the new material. And here in the principal BSDF, if I increase the metallic strength to its maximum value of 1 and reduce the roughness slightly, then you can see here that the object surface has a material which is similar to that of a stainless steel. And here you have some more options like the subsurface, transmission, specular. So if I select the specular, here you will find the anisotropic option. And if I increase it to its maximum value of 1, you will notice some changes here. It is basically stretching the highlights or the reflections on your object surface. Or we can also say that it is adding a brush effect on the surface of the object. You might have seen a brushed aluminium surface, and this material surface looks very much similar to it. And here you have this anisotropic rotation option. So if I change this, you will notice that this anisotropic effect is now being rotated on the object surface. So if I finalize it here, you can see that this pink highlights here are due to the pink light that we added in our scene, and these white highlights are due to the reflection from the white light that we added in this direction. Also right now the surface is slightly more reflecting and smooth, and to reduce this, I'll go to the roughness and increase it. Let's keep it to a value of something around 0.25, and now it kind of looks like a brushed metal or brushed aluminium. So now we can save this material also in the asset library. For this, I'll go to the shader editor, then we'll change the name from here and let's rename it to brushed aluminium. And now if I go to the scene collection and click on the drop down menu of the selected UV sphere, and then if I click here, then we can find the brushed aluminium in this list, and if I select it and right click, we have this option of mark as asset. So I'll click on it, and now this brushed aluminium material is saved in our asset library. To view the asset browser, click on this icon, and from this list you can select the asset browser. Now here the user library is selected, and you can see that we now have two different materials in our asset library or the material library. One of them is the chrome metal and the other one is the brushed aluminium. So if I take this chrome material, left click and drag it on my UV sphere, then the UV sphere will get assigned the chrome metal. Similarly, if I left click on the brushed aluminium and drag it on the UV sphere, it will get assigned the material of the brushed aluminium. And now to create another material, I'll turn this into the shader editor again by clicking on this icon and selecting the shader editor. Now I'll select this UV sphere and we'll create a duplicate of it and right click to restrict the movement. Now we'll go to the scene collection. This is the hidden sphere which we use for creating the chrome material, and to hide these things you can click on this drop down arrow. Similarly, this is the second UV sphere which we use for creating the brushed aluminium material, and we'll hide this one also. So I'll click on this eye, and to collapse this, I'll click on this drop down arrow. Now this third sphere, that is the sphere.002, will be used to create the third material of this chapter. For this, first I'll remove this material from it by clicking on this cross icon and we'll give it a new material. And again we'll we'll be creating a different type of metal. So we'll take the metallic strength to its maximum value of 1, and by default the color of our metal is white, and to change this I'll go to the base color, and this time I'll change it to grey color. So for this I'll use this brightness slider and bring it down, and this much looks good, so I'll finalize it. And to give it a better look, I'll reduce the roughness from here, and now it looks perfect, and finally it looks like a dark metal. Also, if you want to make it even more darker, you can go to the base color and further reduce the brightness from here, but I think that I should keep it somewhere in the middle of the brightness slider. And this much looks good. And now let's rename this material, and I'll name it as dark grey and press enter. And now to save this material in the asset library, go to the scene collection, click on this drop down arrow, then click here on the drop down arrow, and here you have the material of the dark grey metal. I think that we should change the name to dark grey metal instead of dark grey. So one way is to go over here, left click and then change the name, but you can also do it in the scene collection here. For this I'll double click, and now you can edit the name from here. So I'll type metal and press enter to confirm. Now to save this material in the asset library, right click and select the mark as asset, and to view the asset browser here, click on this icon and select the asset browser, and it's showing only these two materials because it is not refreshed. And to refresh the browser, click on this refresh icon, and now you can see that you have all the three materials in your asset library. This one is the dark grey metal, this one is the brushed aluminium, and this one is the chrome metal. And now we'll be creating another material, which is the gold metal. To do this, I'll go back to the shader editor, and now we have to create a duplicate of this UV sphere. So I'll select it, Shift D to create duplicate, right click to cancel the movement, and to hide the previous UV sphere, I'll go to the scene collection and click on this eye, and let's collapse this by clicking on this drop down arrow button. And to give it a new material, I'll first remove the existing material and click on the new button here. Now the gold metal is very metallic and shiny. As a result, I'll take the metallic value to the maximum value of 1, and to make it shiny I have to reduce the roughness to a very low value. Currently it's set at 0.5, but let's reduce it to a value of somewhere around 0.1. Now to set the gold color, one way is to go to the base color and change it to something like yellow or orange, and it might even work in most of the cases. But if you are very specific about the gold material, then you can see that you have some options here. This one is the RGB, where you can influence the color by adjusting the red color and the green color, similarly the blue color. So by increasing or decreasing these values, you can create different types of colors. Then the second one is the HSV, which is the default one, and the third one is the HEX, which uses the hexadecimal values to set your colors. So every color has an HEX value assigned to it, and to know the HEX value of gold, you can search it up on Google, and when I searched for it, it showed me this value D4AF37. So I'll type it here, D4AF37, and press enter. And now this material has the perfect gold color. In fact, you can use this for any kind of material or any kind of metal that you are making in Blender. You just type the metal name on Google and add HEX in front of it, and then you will get the color code or the hexadecimal value of that particular color or the metal. And now let's change the name of this material to gold. So I'll type gold and press enter. Now to save this in the asset or the material library, I'll go to the scene collection again, click on this drop down arrow, then click here, and here you have the gold material. So after selecting it, if I right click and go to the mark as asset option, then this gold material is now saved in the asset library. To view the asset browser here, click on this icon and select the asset browser. Now we'll refresh it, and here we have all the 4 materials that we have made till now. The first material that we created in this chapter was this chrome metal, the second one was this brushed aluminium, the third one that we created was this dark grey metal, and the fourth metal that we created just now was this gold metal. And now it's the time to move to the last topic for this chapter, which is creating glossy base materials. So now we'll change this to the shader editor again, click on this icon and select the shader editor. Now I'll select this UV sphere and we'll create a duplicate of it to create the glossy material. So I'll press Shift plus D and then right click, then I'll go to the scene collection here and I'll hide the UV sphere which was used to create the gold material, and let's also collapse this by clicking on this down arrow and this one also. Now to create the glossy material on this UV sphere, first I need to remove this gold material. So click on this cross icon, and to give it a new material, click on the new button, and now we have the default material assigned to our UV sphere. Now the most important thing while creating glossy materials is that the roughness of this material is completely 0. So let's go to the shader editor, and in the principal BSDF I'll reduce the roughness to 0, and now if you look at the UV sphere, its surface is very shiny, and that's a characteristic of glossy materials. And to change its color, I'll go to the base color and let's change this to blue color, and now it looks like this. And it's not necessary that you have to give only only blue color to it. You can assign any color of your choice to this material. Now, one of the most important things to notice here is that the surface of this UV sphere is very reflecting, and the reason for this is that I have reduced the roughness to 0. However, this reflecting nature is different from that of a metal. Suppose I go to the metallic property and increase it to its maximum value. You can see here that this material is also reflecting, but it's different from our glossy materials. It's showing the complete reflection on the surface, but if I reduce the value to create a glossy material, then you will still notice some reflections and some lights, but you can't completely see them on the surface. And that's what makes glossy based materials different from metals. And now this blue glossy material looks ready, and you can even try different colors from here. Right now it's set to a blue color, but you can even create different materials by changing the colors from here. Like right now it looks like a blend of yellow and red color, and if I change it to green color, it looks like this. So you can make any number of materials with the same properties of roughness, metallic and other things, and just simply by changing the colors. So for this one, I'll set the color to green, and now we can save this in our asset library. For this, I'll go to the scene collection, click on this arrow, then click here, and here is our material. So I'll double click on it to change the name, and we'll rename it as glossy green and press enter to rename. Now to save this in our asset library, we have to right click and select mark as asset. And now let's view it in our asset browser. So I'll click on this icon, go to asset browser, and I'll refresh by clicking on this icon, and here we have the glossy green material. So now we have added these 5 materials in our asset or the materials library. And now to manipulate the looks of your glossy material, you can use the roughness of the principal BSDF. So let's try to create a new material which will also be glossy but with a different roughness. For this, click on this icon and select the shader editor. Now I have to create a new duplicate, so I'll select this, press Shift+D and right click. Now in the scene collection, if I scroll down, here we have the new sphere. Let's also collapse this by clicking on this icon, and I'll hide the previous UV sphere. So on this UV sphere, we have this glossy green material applied, and instead of creating a new material again and doing all these settings, we can even create a duplicate of it and do the changes on that material. And to do this, click on this icon here, which is the new material icon, and now you can see here that the name of this material is glossygreen.001, which means that it has created a duplicate of the previous material. And now if I go to the roughness and increase it slightly, you will notice that the look of your material has changed. It still looks like a glossy material, but the reflections or the highlights on the surface have now reduced, and at a roughness value of approximately 0.23 or 0.24, it appears like a painted glossy surface. I think that we should round off the roughness to 0.25 for a better look, and now it looks perfect. So I'll change its name from here. Let's remove this 001 at the end, and I'll type painted and press enter to finalize. Now this is the glossy green painted material, and we'll save this in the material library. For this, go to the scene collection, click on this arrow, then click here, and here you have the glossy green painted material. So I'll click on it, right click, and then mark as asset. To open the asset browser, click on this icon and select the asset browser. And if I refresh, so one of these materials is the glossy green and the other one is the glossy green painted. So this brings us to the end of this chapter. The next chapter will be the part 2 of the basic shaders, and there we'll be creating a simple glass shader, a cloth shader, and a lot of new materials. So our next chapter is gonna be the chapter number 22, basic shaders part 2. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel, press that notification bell so that you can get timely updates about the upcoming chapters. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.